webinar. I'm your host, Joshua Cardenas, Director of Growth at Angeles Investors. Angeles is one of the biggest and fastest growing angel groups in the United States. We have a vibrant community of 700 investors. We have over 30 sponsors between the biggest banks, biggest tech companies, biggest law firms, and so much more. This year, we're celebrating our 5th year anniversary, and I just wanted to say that this is just the beginning. There is a lot of growth still to achieve. And now that I mentioned this 5th year anniversary, our guest today, Marcelo, was part of the amazing group that co founded Angeles. And I wouldn't be here, and nor you viewers would be here if it wasn't for Marcelo and this group. Marcelo is someone who has not only led digital transformation for some of the world's most iconic companies, but also helped define what modern leadership in tech looks like, and most in this age of AI and disruption that is happening. He's a C-suite executive. He's worked for companies like Kraft Foods, Pirelli, and most recently, ThoughtWorks. Marcelo currently serves on the boards of Angeles Investors, High Tech, and formerly he was board in UNICEF Midwest. Marcelo is the founder and CEO of The Accent, where he coaches global leaders and teaches them how to navigate disruption with clarity, purpose, and human-centered strategy. So today we're going to have a really good conversation about his book, and of course we'll talk a little bit about AI. So without further ado, Marcelo, welcome.
Well, thank you, Joshua. Thank you for having me, and thanks for the work you do for Angeles Investors. It's very inspiring.
It is good to have you here. We're happy to have you. We're honored to have you, and I just wanted to start asking you, how was that first meeting 5 years ago when you jumped into helping, build and co-found Angeles Investors?
It was full of questions. As any business that is starting from almost scratch, you got David Olivencia and Adela Cepeda bringing the vision, and a few of us trying to see how we put the first, I would say, building blocks, right? So it was a learning process for us, at least for me. I never done something like this, and and it was exciting because the vision was very powerful, right? And when you have a powerful vision, then you have endless energy to make it happen. So it was great, and when I look back and see we were a few, and now we are 500 plus members and a fund and many companies and founders were supporting. It's really nice to look back and see where we are. So thanks to everyone that make this happen.
Great, great. And something curious about you, Marcelo, something that I wanted to touch base into before we jump into our discussion into your book and about AI and tech. Marcelo, I know that one of your big passions is mountain climbing, right? And if I'm correct, you climbed Mountain Everest twice already?
That's correct. I try. I never got to the top. I mean, it was Everest and I have had a very special relationship, so to speak. Right, 2014, and an avalanche killed many people that year. Right, five of them were in my team. One of them, a very good friend of me and my wife, and came back in 2016, very close to the summit above country, and I got a pulmonary edema and I have to come back, and I let you guys read the rest of the story in the book. But those are the epiphany moments that make your life better going forward, right? I always say that after that day, which was maybe a very difficult day in my life, and also was the first day of a new chapter of my life, in where I typically say that I got a lot of appreciation for the time I have in this planet, and try to always make sure I use that time to contribute to others. Apologies for my dog, but there is a storm here in Florida, and he doesn't like it.
He's scared. He's scared now. How is your cold? Your dog cold?
uh, Sorry.
What's the name of your dog?
Oh, Billy. He's a Sherman Shepherd. He doesn't like storms. So sorry about that.
No worries, no worries. So it's I found this data point, and I don't know if you know, there's historically only 7,270 people have done in the whole history have climbed Mount Everest. That means that you're in the 0.0000, I don't know how many zeros are there, of people who've
Remember,
done
I
it.
was close. I didn't get there, but I keep saying that is still in my list after having climbed many other mountains. Um, and what I enjoy, honestly, from mountain climbing, I was in Ecuador a few months ago, climbing Chimborazo and Cotopaxi and many other mountains around those two volcanoes, which are, 5,000 meters more or less. It's a nice hike. What I really enjoy is the teamwork and the preparation and the, I would say, trust that you have in a climbing team. I always say that if I could put that in a bottle and sell it to companies and organizations, I mean, leadership and teamwork, we have a completely different profile across the world because after or above 5,000 meters, the only thing that you have is your humanity. It's a place that lack of oxygen, you don't want to eat, you can go to the restroom, things like that. The only thing you have is yourself, your attitude, and the way you relate to others, which at the end of the day, it's instrumental for a climbing team to achieve a summit day, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, there are a lot of experience to highlight about resilience, survival instincts, and the symbolism of the figure eight knot. That is how you called your book. And I wanted to dive deep into that now that we touched that topic. And is why did you write the book Figure Eight? Like why was that? I know that it has to do a little bit with your experience on this Mountain Everest the second time you were trying it. So why doing it?
Well, you mentioned that most of my life has been around technology, right? And I really wrote Figure Eight after seeing it was a growing, I would say, disconnect in terms of, on one side you have technology accelerating at an exponential pace, but leadership and the ability of organizations to adapt wasn't evolving fast enough to take advantage of the value and also minimize the risk of misusing these new technologies. So I spent many hours and meetings with executives, boards, different organizations, not only for profit but non for profit organizations, and and that validated my concern, right? I mean, because in each of those conversations, the main concern was people feeling outpaced by technology, right? I mean, you could hear things like, we're falling behind, things like that. If we were talking to a company, they will say, well, I don't know if my business model will go through this, is going to be disrupted. If we're talking to government or any public service or organization, they were discussing how to modernize laws or regulations, or do we really need regulations, and how much do we need for things that we don't know what the outcome is. And each of us, right? I mean, if you talk to people, to your friends, your family, typically the concern was about what does it mean for us in our lives, right? I mean, jobs, skills, education, access to opportunity. So my goal with Figure Eight as a book was to create a resource, right, that equip leaders and people driving transformation to effectively navigate the complexities of technology innovation. The book was envisioned from the beginning to be practical, right? It's a practical guide, right? Um, it has, like I always say, it's three ingredients. It has inspiration, it has space for reflection, but at the end of the book and at the end of the day, the reason I wrote the book is for people to take action, right? So I intentionally combined stories, research, and tools in the book, which ended up in a leadership framework called Figure Eight, right? Um, the book was a journey. I interviewed more than 25 people, not only technology leaders, but also business leaders, heads of nonprofit organizations, athletes, venture capital leaders, entrepreneurs, etc., etc. I just wanted to get different perspectives about how to lead in these times. And you mentioned something about the name of the book. People say, "Oh, well, why Figure Eight?" Right? Well, Figure Eight relates to my climbing background. Is basically the name of a knot we use, right, when we're climbing, and this knot has a very specific characteristic, right? It's very resilient. It can actually take heavy loads, right? But it's also very easy to untie when you have your big lobes in your hands, and 7,000 meters. You don't think that easily what you do is. It's important that you can actually untie the knot easily. So I thought the versatility of the knot was a great analogy for the leadership needed to navigate these times of exponential technology innovation. So, doing that without losing or being anchored to our personal and organizational purpose. So that was why I wrote the book, more or less.
Now that you mentioned resilience, I find it very interesting, and I wanted to ask, what are you're saying that you have to, when you're climbing, you need to have the ability to untie it depending on the situation that you encounter, right? You never know, an unexpected situation can happen. You need to try and solve things fast. So I would love to ask, what are some practical ways you touch in the book, and practical ways leaders can develop resilience as well as you did climbing, and that it relates to the name of this book.
Mhm, mhm. Well, maybe we go back to the leadership framework, right? And what we call the leadership, the figure eight leadership framework. Basically, the framework has four foundational attributes, right? They are called the four C's of leadership. It's character, competence, connection, and culture, right? Those are the four pillars of the model. These attributes are not standalone, right? I mean, they work with each other. So when you have leaders or teams reflecting on them, it helps them to really be better positioned to manage technology innovation. So let me give you a little bit of overview of the model. When we talk about character, character is basically your moral compass, right? The values that shape your decisions, or the values of the organization that shapes the decisions of the organization as a whole. Competence is your skill set, right? It's not only what you know, but it's also how well you execute with what you know, right? It's both, right? Connection is how you relate with others, right? And really contextualize the decisions you make. You're making decisions in a system, right? Typically, your organization is your market, is the world, is society. So the relationship you have with that environment is very important. And then the last one, the last C is about culture, is the environment you create, you shape as a leader, which is basically the result of everything you model as a leader, as an individual within your organization, within your family, within your neighborhood, wherever you are operating and leading. So these four attributes, as you can see or can sense, are really profoundly human, right? And the reason I focus on those attributes is because I think, at least for now, I'm not gonna say forever, AI cannot replicate them, right? Uh, go back to part of your question. How do you use this in real life, right? Um, the way I use the framework is, I use it for leadership development at the team and individual level, right? At the individual level, it's just to unlock certain characteristics of leaders for being able to become much more resourceful leaders with their organizations. And when we use this with teams, it helps them align around these four elements with clarity and with consistency, right? So when you get to that point, a team is extremely powerful in how they drive innovation, how do they, manage uncertainty, and actually achieve results in an environment that is pretty difficult, specifically these days. Even when you share the model with boards, I found that reflecting through the four C's, they get a different perspective in regards to strategy, oversight, and governance, which are three things that boards, spend most of their time. So they open up their perspective on the things that they need to look at when you are operating companies and organizations in an environment in where technology is taking over every single aspect of an organization, the employee experience, the internal processes, the connection with customers, with the stakeholders. So it's a very interesting conversation. It's a different angle of the conversation. What I found also through the conversation, Joshua, if you let me share this, is we're now saying well conversation. Typically, what you find is the four C's are little bit out of balance, right? And people actually see that when they reflect and they use the exercises of the book. For example, sometimes you have too much competence in an organization, but there is no too much character, that moral compass. So that creates risk, right? I mean, you might not actually have the right,
Yeah.
I would say,
Now that
conversation to
yeah,
to to
now
create
that
it.
you mentioned the competence, for example, and now that you're saying like sometimes there's this imbalance between them. Sometimes, for example, for competence, sometimes it's hard to find the balance because the technical competence relies, on logic, in problem solving, and most of these cases, this logic and problem solving involves and develops through a solitary focus and structures of training, right? And then you have the second C, which is the character, that includes all the aspect of the emotional intelligence, and that requires empathy, self-awareness, social sensitivity. So basically, the skills that are, or basically developing an interpersonal interaction. So how do you, for some people, this balance is between those two is complicated. How do you make that balance between the logic and the social sensitivity part?
I think it all starts with the values of the organization or the values of the leader. Remember, you can apply this to a person or to a team or to an organization, right? Let's assume we apply this to a team, which is maybe the easiest example. Um, First, you make the team reflect individually, and then make the team reflect where do they want to be as a team, as a unit, right? And as you reflect on those gaps, some people will say we are here, we should be there. Then it's about reflecting on mindset shifts that they need to do as an individual and as a team, right? And as they actually write them down, in the book you will find tools that will force you, gently force you, to define this is the way we think today, this is the way we need to think differently in the future. And the reason we do that in the exercise is because it's a very logical aspect of the book. If you want to get different results, you need different actions, right? And to get different actions, basically, you need to change the way you think, right? If you don't shift the way you yourself and your team think about something, potentially you're going to continue to do the same things that you were doing in the past, right? So you do need to find those shifts in terms of character, right, on one side, and competence, right? And you make them very tangible, right? It goes to the point of these are the things I'm going to do, right? To change my mindset and then to commit to new actions going forward. When you do that in a team and when you align everyone around the team around those things, it's absolutely amazing how you start to see results going in the right direction. Actually, getting results that before you were not getting, right?
And now that you mentioned that and you integrate, I see it very interesting how you interconnect the third and the fourth C. So when you usually talk with boards and implement this leadership, the third C is connection, and the fourth C is the culture. Sometimes there's a resistance to change the culture, and also for when we're talking about the connection, there's also a resistance about having new leaders and listening to new ideas, like valuing the diverse perspectives. How do you manage and how do you integrate those four or all aligned when it comes to the difficulties that it presents to change the culture?
I mean, I always start from a principle about culture in organizations, right? And it came to me more by observation and experience than maybe science. But if you do specific analysis on organizational culture, you will always find something that is interesting, which is we think culture in organization is a monolith, right? This is one thing that is all the same. And as you get, if you go across, let's say, a traditional organization with different levels, right? As you get closer to where the work is being done and the clients are being, I would say, served, you start to see that there are different flavors of the same culture, right? And those flavors sometimes are more or less aligned with the way you want to be in the future, right? So to your question, how do you do that? How do you actually change the culture of organization? First, you need to understand what culture do you need in your organization, and typically that's in a conversation that goes around the vision of the organization, where the organization needs to go in the future. Once you have that, it's very important to find that pocket of the organization that has a culture that is similar to what the future state culture should be, and engage them in the transformation, right? And when you need to change these mindsets and actions, you want those groups, those teams, those sub teams, those individuals to be part of the change, right? So they have to feel that they have the mission to create the center of gravity, and from there, eventually, the culture of the whole organization will start to shift to the way to the place you want to be in the future, right? But you do need to find that place. Now, if you don't find that place, which it could happen, right? Um, I think the reason you have leaders in the organization, specifically as we automate more and more the operational work, is basically to do two things. Is to create a place in where people can be at their best, and to shape a culture that makes people to be at their best, the clients to be at their best, the organization to be at their best. I mean, leaders basically become shapers of culture. And that, to me, that what I see in 5, 10 years from now, when we have automated most of the operational work, that's the kind of leader that you want to have in organizations. Leaders that can create that environment in where humans can be at their best, and an organization that can be, I would say, respected by anyone that wants to connect with them, right, or do business with them. So I think that's the difficult task of a leader going forward, right? It's not getting things done, is creating the environment for things to get done in an extraordinary way.
And something that I think and I want to recall is culture sometimes kind of surpasses the strategy, and that's something that I've seen in many organizations. If you have a big culture in a good culture, it could over and surpass your strategy, right? And something that I want to ask you is, you were talking about the third one, the connection, and how this inclusive leadership is critical for building that strategy, right? Because you listen to new ideas, you're open to inclusivity, to diversity of ideas, different backgrounds. Just as you have your background on Europe, on Asia, your background on America. So why inclusive leadership is critical for this innovation and adaptability, and now that we're talking about this culture change.
So, so diversity and inclusion as a business element to me is extremely important in this model because, as you said, right, if we are going to build products, right, services for an organization, if we are going to, if you want to stay at the edge of innovation, I think the first thing you need to do is to be open to get as much feedback as possible and as much diverse feedback as possible, right? You want to learn from those clients that love your product. You want to learn from those clients that they think your product is not good, right? You want to create a digital experience that caters to a certain part of the population, a certain segment, but also you need to be able to have the tools and the information to adapt that to a different segment of customers. And that only happens when you bring into the conversation people that have different ways of looking at reality. We all look at reality through the lens of our past experiences, where are we coming from, our, place in the world. And companies that bring diversity and inclusion into the product development cycle, I think it's an asset. It's an asset, it's an accelerator of revenue, it's an accelerator of market share, it's an accelerator of sustainability of a business, right? Because if you continue to get that feedback often, right, you can actually adapt those products hopefully in the future with technology almost in real time, right?
Great. And now that you mentioned that, I find it very interesting. And you were mentioning before that you work with boards, you implement the culture. More specifically, for those who are viewing this, what is that step-to-step guide? Before we jump into discussing the trends and how the new environment and disruption, for example, of AI is, and how you can integrate this model into that. Before jumping into that, what are these step-to-step process that you follow to implement this eight not leadership model?
I think the process it starts when a leader wants to really move the needle in their organizations, right? I mean, there is something important in all these conversations with leaders, with individuals, with teams. They want to make it happen, right? I mean, this is not something you go to someone and say, you know what? I think you need to align to these four things, and I have 8 strategies for you. Why don't you adopt them? That doesn't work, right? I'm a coach. I will never coach a person that doesn't have the interest to be coached, right? I mean, so you need to have that interest, that burning platform. Sometimes comes from understanding that we're in a point in our careers where we need a different way of looking at leadership and see how can we deal with the ambiguity, uncertainty of the situation, the fast pace of technology. Sometimes comes because results in organizations are not good, and your business is being disrupted by small startup, right? And you say, why they can do it and I'm 3 times larger than them and I cannot do it? Well, I mean, most of the answers, not all of them, but many of them are within the leadership sphere, right? So it starts with that, with that awareness and desire to change, then continues with using the model to really understand the 4 C's and the 8 strategies. Each C has 2 strategies, more or less. And then individuals reflect, teams reflect. Sometimes we add external feedback if it is an individual, there is someone around them that know them the best, that actually contribute to the feedback, and you have their own view and the view of their peers, their teams, certain key stakeholders. And with all of that, we start to shape where do we want to be based on what results do you want for yourself or for your organization, how, what kind of culture do you want to see in your company, what kind of market presence do you want to be, and then from there we come back to those gaps, right? And start to discuss the three changes that I mentioned before. What preconceptions or mindsets do we need to change from to, and then after we change those mindsets, what kind of new actions do we need to commit, you know, to actually perform in real life, and those become commitments as an individual, if it is an individual coaching or as a team, that have to be follow up later on. So typically this process could take a year, right? Depending of the size of organization or the size of the team. Now you don't need to wait up until a year to see the results. Intentionally, you design the transformation in a way that there are certain monthly, I would say, celebrations, because you're achieving step by step, right? And you're learning step by step. So you celebrate the achievements and the learnings and the things that fail, which are learnings on the other side, and you feel yourself that you are making progress. So it's not a philosophical exercise. It's an exercise rooted in reflection, but I would say a superpower by action, right? Action in real life, action in your organization, action as from you as a leader, if it is an individual coaching session.
Great. And now that you mentioned, I find it interesting. You mentioned that sometimes companies who are bigger than the startups are struggling because the startup creating an artificial intelligence large model that is overpassing what they're building, right? Like what this antique and maybe traditional company has been doing for 200 years, even 100 years. This disruption is now causing a lot of chaos. We're in this bubble of AI, which is disrupting industries, companies, and even founders, I would say. So in your book, you mentioned something that, and you mentioned it before at the beginning, that when you were in your second time climbing, that you were in this state where you lost consciousness and you didn't know how you got back to base camp, right?
Hmm.
And something that I wanted to highlight about that is that sometimes you need to go back to your life insurance in an era by rapid AI advancements, right? So what's your life, I mean, like, what would you recommend to these startup founders or founders of traditional companies that in this industry are now being disrupted, that they have to get back to their roots and go back to their life insurance in this era of rapid AI advancements? What do you recommend?
Hmm. Well, to the large companies, I would say I've been always operating large companies lately, helping founders in smaller companies, and I feel but spend much more time in larger companies, and I know how difficult it is. Especially for a public company, you live quarter by quarter, right? And changing and transforming organizations when you're a public company, when you're scrutinizing every single thing you do every 2 or 3 months, is not easy, right? It takes a lot of courage from a leader, and it takes a lot of connection, because the leader has to really align with many stakeholders to produce that space in where you can build the new while you're still operating your core business, right? Most of the largest innovations or disruptions that happens in a business model, um, you know, they basically need a completely different mindset, a completely different set of skills in many cases, different markets, right? Different products and services. And when you have been making money out of your core business for 25 years and being successful, and you have that what they call, healthy arrogance, right? Is arrogance coming from what you have achieved, right? I mean, that person is arrogant, but that person has achieved a lot, or that company has achieved a lot. I think good leaders that I've seen disrupting or I would say, avoiding as much as possible the disruption, because disruption is a bad word, right? If you are getting disrupted, you're losing business, you're losing value, you're losing customers. Not a good thing, right? Are the ones that have created space in their organization to build a new thing and protect it and give it the right amount of time, not 3 months, to flourish, right? The reason that, to the second part of your question, the reason that the startups sometimes typically disrupt the larger organizations is because they start with absolutely no legacy. You start with a, blank piece of paper. You don't have legacy organization, legacy skills, legacy structures. You typically start very small, so the speed of decision making is extremely fast. Now, on the other side, you see startups getting to this part of the hockey stick, if I guess you know that graph, and the same teams and processes and mindsets and practices that got that organization to that place are not the ones that you need to scale up the organization. In many cases, I've been helping some private equity firms, and the biggest challenge was not the technology, was not the technical talent, was the leadership. The leadership that I enjoy working in smaller companies, and now that these things are processes and we're becoming bigger, this is not for me. Some leaders understand that this is not for me. Some leaders don't understand it and need someone else to tell them, listen, it's okay if this is not for you, but it's not okay that you drive the company into obsolescence, right? That's not a good business leadership, not even good leadership, right? So you need to understand the context of organizations. When it's very easy from outside to say, oh, you are going to be disrupted, you need to transform, right? And you put the transformation program, and after 6 months things don't go well and you cancel it, right? And you fire people and you lost a lot of money, and maybe you told the street you were going to do this and you have to listen. Transformations, I don't believe transformations are projects. Number one, I think transformation in the times we live is a state of being, right? I mean, it never finishes, right? You start to transform and adapt and transform again and adapt. I mean, if you follow if we follow only, which is a lot, if we follow only AI, it has been transforming itself in the last 18 months, in some cases during the weekend. I was going to sleep with some economics of AI, and I woke up on Monday and we have DeepSeek, and the economics of AI change
Totally obsolete.
100%, assuming all the data we have about DeepSeek is true, right? Big assumption, by the way. But still, it changed dramatically an industry, right? It changed dramatically industry of trillions of dollars, right? So, so it's all contextual, right? I mean, transforming companies is an art. Now we are dealing with a pace that is challenging our leadership abilities, and I think we need to just reflect, and change our mindset and commit to new actions to win. Otherwise, past performance does not guarantee future results, right? That's a very well-known statement.
And now that you were mentioning that sometimes leaders come from startups, because now that's the trend, right? Like you get a really good startup from a founder from one startup, and you get into a big position in a major company, right? And sometimes they face what you were telling, like the processes, this is not what I do. The bottleneck basically it's in these processes, the bureaucracy, how many steps they have to do. So how would you and how can companies transform these organizational bottlenecks into innovation opportunities?
Well, first to the person that is joining that, let's say you're a founder of a small startup, right? And your product, your experience can help a large company, right? Large is established, right? I mean, I don't want to say bureaucratic, but big with a lot of processes, right? First of all, you know already that the way you were working in the startup is going to be not normal for the other company, so to speak, right? So I would say before you join that company, you do need to ask how much latitude are you going to have to build this microcosmos within that organization, to protect it, to provide the budget, to give you the opportunity to lead in a different way. Because if you put all the structure of a big company on a new small idea, most likely it's not gonna last for a long time. So to my colleagues that are moving from startups to large companies, and then they complain that the large company was too bureaucratic, I will say, listen, at this point, it shouldn't be a surprise. You have to do your due diligence, and you need to get, that contractual agreement in place, so you can at least have some space to do what you need to do. The second part of your question was how large companies.
Yeah, how large companies, sometimes people, they're saying, like, the example you were giving, this is startup just joined the ecosystem a couple of months ago, and now they're disrupting the industry. They're taking away my clients because they have an agentic AI type of organization, right? And then how do I remove, and not remove, like, how do I remove the bottleneck on my organization, which is big, has a lot of processes? How do I remove that bottleneck in big organizations to leave a path for innovation?
Um, I think there are many cases in where you pair large organizations with startups to you learn how the startup is doing it, and you open doors for new clients potentially, and the startup learns about how to scale up a company, how processes in a large company work. I do like, you know I would say, those kind of collaborations. Um, I haven't seen too many that ended up in a good place, and mostly the reason is why are you joining each other, right? And how do you measure that the things that were the intention, why you were joining each other, are happening or not happening, and you are adjusting as the relationship evolves. Um, to me, the only way to create the again, I go back to creating the space, right? If you don't create the space and isolate that space, isolation means linking the new venture to the mothership whenever makes sense. And let me give you an example. At one point in my career, we didn't know in a large CPG company how to do direct to consumer. When direct to consumer of consumer products was something, that maybe not today, but 7, 10 years ago was a good thing. And we said, we don't know how to do this because we typically sell a pallet of these cookies to a big supermarket, right? And you're now telling me, Joshua, that I should sell a customized tin of these cookies for Christmas to David Olivencia and send it to his home. How do I do that, right? Well, I mean, there is a big gifting opportunity in the market. It was like a $10 billion gifting opportunity. We should try because we do have the product, so we need to learn how to do the other thing. And what we did in that case is we first partnered with one company I was doing gifting and customized products, right? And we partnered for Christmas, right? And we said we're gonna do this in 3 or 4 states of the U.S. It was close to California at that point. I don't remember the states at this moment. And we match a team from the large company with the small company to define the processes for sales, packaging, legal, logistics, right? All the supply chain, the last mile delivery. How do you gift things without sharing, personal information? So we got a startup from Israel, right? And we were here, and then we bought a company. We ended up buying a company that was doing these very, very fancy snacks, right? And we put everything together, and we kind of partner at the beginning, and then everything became a new business. But behind all of that, which is that's a process, right? And you can actually write it down and try to operate that way in another company. The most important thing that happened in that case is that you have the CEO of this 25 plus billion-dollar companies, the chief growth officer, and many of us in different functions, knowing that it was okay to try that, that we had a specific amount of money to try that, and we just want to learn how to do it because we couldn't do it by ourselves. But if we didn't do it, or if we didn't learn how to do it, we were losing the opportunity to penetrate the market that was, pretty pretty good, right? I mean, pretty nice size, right? Gifting is a nice market. So again, I can give you the 350 playbooks, but at the end of the day, what made the difference was someone in the company that had the leadership to say, I'm going to carve out the time, the resources, the protection for these people to go from here to here. When we get there, we're going to evaluate if we continue or if we kill it. In this case, it didn't work in the US. It failed in the US. I mean, it got break even, so to speak. And it worked extremely well in Asia. Why? Well, because many of the processes, the logistics, the customization of these things in Asia at scale and with the retail environment in Asia was like extremely easy to do. So in Asia became a business of millions of dollars. In the US, at that moment, didn't work. So try to give you a real example so you see, yes, it is a process thing. Yes, it is a strategy thing. But if you don't have the people to protect the new business, and it's like watering a plant, right? When it is small, if you don't water the plant every day, it's gonna die, right? And so that's the trick, in my opinion.
And asking for your opinion now. Now, the latest tendency and the latest trend is now the AI agents, for example, now into this AI world. And now we enter in something that you touch in your book is what are these ethic aspects that we need to take care when it comes to the AI and its implementations. The people are worried they're going to lose their jobs. Many businesses are worried an AI, an agentic or OpenAI is going to take their data services and search services away, right? So how do we, stay innovative, but yet remain like calm in this situation,
Hmm.
implementing a little bit of the ethic behind
Hmm.
it?
I you need to see where we're going, right? We're going to a world in where most of our interactions, business interactions, social interactions, education, healthcare, and I can go on and on across all industries, financial transactions, are becoming more and more automated, right? And there is, in many cases, less human contact, right? It's only where it is needed, in where humans can add some aspect of empathy or connection, or many of the things we discussed before. So if you fast forward that, this I mean, you're gonna get a point in where you are at the point today in where you talk to, I don't want to say any of the names of the platforms, but you talk to any of these big generative AI platforms, and they don't list the results of your question. They give you an answer. They give you a point of view, right? They give you a conclusion, right? It's not that they're gonna give you, okay, these are the 10 links that you need to go and navigate and by yourself. So so when I'm talking about ethics, I think is what I call the next generation business strategy in a digital world is ethics. Why? Because people will get to know your brand, your product, your organization, yourself much more by those digital interactions, but interactions with the representatives of your companies, with yourself, actually maybe going into a retail store to buy a product, right? So if you don't make sure that the digital experiences that you build for your employees, for your customers, are fair, are experiences that provide, an inclusive experience for everyone, that in where data is not biased. If I give you an answer, is the best possible answer to the best of my ability, like the lawyers say, right? If you don't have mechanisms in your company to provide that insurance, if you want to call it, using your words, uh, you're going to lose brand equity because I'm going to say, listen, I don't want to work with Marcelo's company because, every time they give me an answer, they just, they're being paid to give me this answer and it's typically the worst product. I want to work with Joshua's company. Why? Because he gives me really the best possible product to the best of his knowledge, right? And he has been doing that consistently. And that's brand equity, right? I mean, because that's going to be the only way that people will experience you as an organization or as an individual. So I think, closing to your question, is ethics in the digital world is 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 a competitive advantage, right? It is going to become the most important thing you can do for your business.
Also, now that you talk about these competitive advantages, sometimes, and you mentioned in your book, there's the ones who know that these technologies are there, but they don't learn them, right? And you talk something about digital literacy and digital fluency, right? And that you say that that's a competitive advantage. Why this difference matters, and how can leaders implement them in their own company?
Well, the first thing is to understand literacy is knowing what any technology is, right? Let's say AI, talking about AI, what AI is, right? That's literacy, right? I mean, knowing. Today, I keep saying YouTube or yeah, I would say YouTube is a most powerful university in the world. You can get yourself upskilled and getting information and knowing about any technology or any new thing by yourself. It's a matter of intention, right? I mean, there are even lists of things that you should look at that that tells you which ones to do, which courses to take. Most of them are free. Some of them are $10, right, or whatever, right? Some of them gives you a certificate. You get even to that point. So, knowing, knowledge is not power anymore, right? Knowledge, raw knowledge. Fluency is, once I know how to use that knowledge, right? So I think when companies are thinking about upskilling, I keep telling my colleagues, yes, do increase the literacy of your organization and people, but don't stop there, because if you stop there, it's 50% of the price. And how do you do that? I mean, some companies I work for, what we were doing is the following. Yes, we were curating a set of, we say we have, for example, Pirelli, we have a digital academy. We're teaching people about algorithms and Python and how to use it. And then we created these competitions. You can call them hackathon. I got tired of hackathons, but much more about, okay, you have now the knowledge, how do you apply it to solve real business problems? And as you do that, no, literacy turns into fluency, and fluency, which is solving a problem with the knowledge, becomes business value. So if you're complaining about, I don't see the ROI of AI, well, you need to do your homework. You need to learn and apply it. And as you apply it, sometimes it's going to hit a home run. Sometimes you're going to learn something that you didn't know before, and it's okay. It's fine. But you need to move your organization from literacy to fluency, because the application of that knowledge is what builds business value. The knowledge in itself, anyone can get it for free in YouTube, is commodity, is not a competitive advantage, and it's up to us to upskill ourselves. Don't call your company or someone else. You can do it tomorrow. Do it if you're listening to this conversation. The best thing you can do is have 1 hour per week to learn some new trick, right? I mean, that's the best utilization of your time these days. 1 hour per week. 1 hour.
And before I ask you something else about the trends that are coming, upcoming trends that you see in the industries, technologies, going back to this safety rope that I mentioned, that was maybe the name of your book, but one data point that I want to make and share with our viewers is that 53%, based on a Microsoft research, 53% of leaders say productivity must increase. And that goes with what you, Marcelo, is saying. Like, productivity, yes, must increase, but you need to start learning it and becoming fluently on how to do that. And by this productivity, they mean that they are implementing AI agents, implementing AI, new large models that can bridge that productivity gap that they are seeing in their companies. So our invitation here is also, elevate your digital fluency, develop that first competency on the model of Marcelo, so that you can, get to these new trends that are coming. And now jumping into these trends, Marcelo, what are these upcoming trends, technologies that you're seeing in the market that you say this is going to disrupt many industries that maybe the ones who are not tech leaders like you are not yet aware of?
I don't think I'm gonna say something that is too new, but I'm a picture person, right? If I had a whiteboard in front of me, I will draw like an umbrella, right? That's an umbrella trend, right? Which is basically scaling AI across the enterprise, right? Why I'm saying this? Because in the last year and a half, we have been doing proof of concepts and MVPs, and when someone is calling myself or my colleagues and say, can you do a proof of concept? I say, We can, and it's going to work. Let me tell you, it's going to work because you're going to make it work, because you're going to find the right space to experiment, and typically you're going to get the right data and the right talent and the right help and the right context, and it's going to work, right? So what do you do after the thing is the scaling up, and I think that's the big challenge for the next couple of years. I don't want to go more than a couple of years because things change that much. So if you take that scaling AI across organization, I see like, I would say, four spaces to watch, right? If you're a technology leader, an investor, you're an executive, the first one is looking at these models that they specialize, right? I mean, general models are the ones we all use, OpenAI or Anthropic, whatever, right? I mean, they're amazing, they're general, but I do see the ones that are industry specific or function specific, like, I don't know, a model that is tuned for healthcare or for legal specific work. Those will get much more traction as companies will try to embrace them to bring productivity in their value streams, right? So that's space to watch, specialized AI models. The second one, I would say, agentic AI, no AI agents, and let me explain that. A, AI agents is using an agent to automate one activity, right? When we talk about agentic AI, is a set of agents across the organization making decisions, providing information, autonomously, moving things from A to B and collaborating with each other. It's a very different thing, right? It's like I automate this activity and I have all these things talking to each other that I have to actually maintain, monitor, evolve, right? So that space of is where I think companies will get most of the value, right? Why? Because you're going to be automating a full value stream in the organization, and actually also you will challenge your organizational structures, because typically these things are not going to follow. I am in marketing, I am in procurement, I am in finance. They will act across the company, and that's something that's a different battle, right? How do we organize for humans and machines to organize? So the second one is agentic AI. The third thing that I see coming, and I think we all see coming, is completely different interfaces. How do we connect with computers, right? As I said before, we are going from typing a query and getting links to asking a question and getting a good answer, right? You have ChatGPT, Perplexity, Google AI's overview, which is actually challenging many things. Even they can actually book a trip for you, they can book a dinner for you. So what's happening in that space is that it's redefining the way we interact with technology, right? from transforming the way we do marketing, advertising, e-commerce. It's a behavioral shift. So it's a massive opportunity in how do we build technology to support completely new business models. And last but not least, with this I finish, is robotics, right? I mean, if you follow the last, say, 3 or 4 months, what has happened is that the way we train robots has evolved, and the cost of training robots and making them more smarter, more dexterous, um, is less. So you will see that robots are not going to be only used in industries, but also you might have one in your home that does cleaning or laundry. And I think the signal you need to look in the market is the technology is there. I can feel the technology there. You look at different companies from Boston Dynamic here. If you look to Unitry in Asia, the technology is there. Is what you need to look at is what companies can actually scale up, right? I mean, the production and all the businesses that are going to be behind supporting robots, evolving robots, replacement parts. So it's a huge space for investment, that I think it also is one of my preferred ones because I see a lot of economic value across many aspects of our life, right? So those are the four. I mean, there are three, one that I will add across, which is data and talent and those kind of things that are enablers. Do not lose the sight on we are spending a lot of money in infrastructure for AI these days, which is great because we do need to. But on the other side, we need to make sure we have the right people, to think about how to evolve these things. So we need to, if we put $500 billion on infrastructure is capex, right? So how do we build applications and evolve use cases so that infrastructure actually pays back, right? And that will come from talent in most of the cases.
Great. Marcelo, thank you for your insights. We value them because we understand that you have this context on being every day on the technology industry, and also your insights from being in Asia, Europe, and now in America that are really, really valuable. Before we jump into Q&A, I wanted to ask you a couple more questions into your book, and is who can most benefit from this book and from this model? Who are those key targets that can benefit from this model?
Well, key targets is anyone that is in the middle of transforming an organization, right? Because of technology or feeling that technology is actually changing the business model, the employee experience, the customer experience. I think the framework will provide the leadership competencies for that person or team organization to really find different ways of thinking, different ways of acting, and those new actions will drive them to new results, right? So that's clearly the target for this book, but anyone can read it, right? I mean, I met people that are not in executive positions, neither in boards or leading transformations, and they told me they found some of the concepts something they can apply even in their personal life, right?
Great. And before jumping, last question before jumping into open Q&A, what's that advice for someone who's considering to write a book? Because you were mentioning it was a challenge. 20 people you interviewed, years and years of experience. I know that you were in the process of writing this plague book with UNICEF. All that stuff, was combined in this book. So what's your advice to someone who's considering writing a book? And by the way, we over-index in members who are authors, as you at Angeles Investors. So that's another key point. And I'm pretty sure a bunch of members want to write a book.
Uh, I think that the first thing is everyone is able to write a book because everyone has a story to tell, right? Everyone. I bet you $1,000. Everyone has a story to tell. The second thing is if you wait for the right moment to write the book, it will never happen. You will never have the time, you will never have enough energy, and you will always find a way to say, I'm gonna do it next. You know, when I was writing my book, I never wrote a book, right? And English is my second language, right? At that point, AI was not as good as it is today. I can help you much more today. Um, and one day I was with my job and other things I was doing and the book, and I told my wife, I'm gonna quit my book. And thanks to my wife, she said, listen, you had a vision, you want to do it, your topic is relevant, get back to that seat and write the book. She said it in a different way. I'm just being polite because we're in a public setting, but it's totally true. You will never have the time. You know, you have story, you will never have the right time to write the book. Start now. And I think last but not least, something that, and I wrote the book with a company, coach you through the process, right? It tells you how to think about the chapter, how to think about the book, how to write a good hook in a chapter, how to do marketing of your book. I learned 100%. I discovered that the most important thing of my book was not the book in itself. It was the process to write the book. Because I learned to write the book, something I didn't know before. I met amazing people through the interviews, which I learned things I never was expecting to learn. Actually, they changed the way I wrote the book because, oh, I didn't think about that. So take the step and the intention to write the book, not only because you want to write the book, but enjoy the process of writing the book if it is your first book. If it is your second book, it's going to be a little bit more painful in some aspects, less in others. But if it is your first one, you're learning to write the book. You're blessed, right? Give yourself a chance to learn a new trick, and it will change your life. It will definitely change your life.
Great. And yeah, I encourage everyone to start today because you said, no, I'm going to start tomorrow. And then tomorrow is another tomorrow, so you never do it. So thank to your wife for telling you to, in a different way, do it and sit down and write your book. We now opening to Q&A. I think we have a couple of questions in the chat. Let me just read it to you. Juan is asking, you mentioned culture briefly. How do you build a culture of experimentation without compromising accountability?
Without compromising accountability, I think you need to redefine accountability, right? When you are experimenting, I hope is because you want to get to a place that is new for you, right? Let me give you an example of climbing mountains, right? The reason we climb mountains in camps, camp 1, camp 2, camp 3, camp 4, is that we don't know what's the next right step. Actually, even if the route is well known, we don't know if we're going to have an avalanche or anything. So we really go step at a time, we evaluate, we learn, and if we're in the right direction, we bet to go to the next camp. So the way you drive accountability when you are experimenting is your first, I assume you want to do something that you didn't know how to do before. Second, you set learning objectives. You say, I'm going to spend $10,000 to go from here to here, and either I make it or I learn what I don't need to do. That's it. I'm open to spend the 10,000. Yes. Okay. So give value to the learning process because otherwise it will never happen, right? So the team is accountable to increase your literacy and fluency in whatever you are trying to do. That's the accountability. Because when you get there, you might not have a final product, but you will be closer to have a new product. So that's the accountability. You need to redefine accountability.
Great. And another question that they are asking is that they are saying you've lived and worked across Latin America, Europe, and the US, and also Asia. What's one leadership insight you've gained from navigating different global business cultures? Talking about culture.
That I think value, the definition of value is different for different people, right? So um, I always remember we were trying to When I went to Asia, we were trying to launch a brand of cookies, very, very big one, in Asia, right? And we said, listen, we have been building these cookies all our life. We know how to do it. We're gonna get the same marketing, the same ingredients, the same thing. We're gonna build a big manufacturing plant, and we're gonna sell thousands of tons of this thing. So when we do the consumer test, you always consumer goods, you always do test to see if what you're gonna sell, someone is gonna buy it, right? We start to get all this feedback about, well, we don't like this, it's too sweet, we like different feeling, blah, blah, blah. To make the long story short, right? Most of the feedback was about I need to change the ingredients of the cookie, and it challenged 100% of our, I would say, belief that the product is this, that there's only one product for everyone. Well, to make the long story shorter, we changed it. It became the largest market in the world because we changed that thing, and it was only sold on that market, which was an amazing business, super profitable. But we also learned that value, the definition of value for different people across the world, specifically in a consumer space, is different, right? What is good for you and you value it here in the US, you go to the Philippines, and it might be a different thing because they eat different things, right? So, so I learned to pivot and adapt and win businesses because of doing that.
Great. And finally, Marcelo, this is not a question that is in the chat, but rather my question, mostly into what's the power of Angelus investors? You co-founded first high tech, then Angelus investors. Why and what why do you think what do you think is the power of Angelus investors?
The power of angelist investors is if you look at the economy of the US, the impact that Latinos and Latinas are having in the economy is amazing, right? It's an economy in itself, right? It could be the economy of France, right? So what I think we are building, or we built in Angeles Investors, is a platform in where anyone can join to actually continue to grow that community in a very expansive way, right? If you are an investor, great, you can invest. If you are not an investor and you want to learn how to be an investor, join us and we learn together, right? If you are a founder looking for capital or funding, come here. Sometimes we will say, yes, I give you the money. Sometimes we will say, you are not ready for us to give us the money. Now, let me tell you, you never lose. The first time you get the money, the first case you get the money, in the second case, we have a relationship and maybe we invest in your organization in the future. And I think what is to me extremely inspiring is seeing people like you joining Angeles Investors. Most of you, every single intern that come to Angeles Investors, or employee that young as you with all your energy, then they end up in large venture capital firms and things. So I feel that we are infusing this Latina talent in all these places, and we are not only building and growing the companies in our portfolio, but we're growing the industry because Latinos and Latinas are a great part of the GDP of the US. And the more of us being in different parts of the company, the economy will grow faster and better, and we all will enjoy that benefit.
Great. And there's also a lot of industries are happening. There could be supply chain, could be aerospatial industry, right? That's coming up, and at Angeles we specialize in investing on these high potential startups across the US. So just to the point. And finally, another question that I just saw in the chat that I thought it could be worth speaking is, before we close, is what is your advice for people who want to break into AI but their LinkedIn profile or resumes don't reflect those capabilities? And I think you can respond saying like, hey, this is the importance of this competence C at the beginning of your book.
Um, I mean, I don't think it's a matter of what you have in your LinkedIn profile or not. I mean, obviously, if you need to showcase your LinkedIn profile with the capabilities and competencies you have, right? But listen, too many of us talk about AI. Few know how to build AI products, right? And those few are typically people that have been in software engineering for many years, right? So I always respect one thing is fluency, another thing is literacy, another thing is the two things together, right? So what you need to do is learn. Learn by yourself. Don't wait your employer to give you a course or I mean, there is plenty of free training on AI. Actually, I done my agents for many things I do every day to do research. I mean, there are tools that are for free, right? So it's not that the accountants are not going to exist anymore. The accountants that do not know how to use AI are the ones that are going to have a hard time finding a job, right? The doctors that don't know how to use AI to improve patient outcomes are the ones that are going to have a hard time continue to be doctors, maybe. So it's like that. It's you need to bring AI. It's like the new electricity, as people say, right? I mean, we are in this platform. I'm sure there's some AI thing running behind and scripting all everything we are running, and we are talking, and it's gonna summarize and think. AI is everywhere, right?
Great, amazing, amazing knowledge and insights, Marcelo. Thank you. And well, to close, first of all, thank you, Marcelo, for such an insightful and inspiring conversation. Today, we explored the Figure 8 leadership model, how leaders can build resilience, drive innovation, and adapt ethically to a world shaped by exponential technologies. We touch powerful themes such as digital fluency, emotional intelligence, AI risk, tech trends, ethical responsibility, and innovation. Marcelo, your reflections reminded us that leadership today requires both vision and values. Thank you for sharing your time and thank you for sharing those characteristics
Thank
generously
you,
with
thank you for
us.
having me, and good evening, everyone.
Thank you. So my final call to action is to join us at Angeles Investors. We are as a member or as a sponsor, as a partner, we're committed to leverage Latino growth to find, fund, and fuel the most promising ventures. And as we were discussing, there are a lot of disruptions industries that are getting now reshaped, and we invest in these in the best startups in America. So encourage everyone to visit us at angelesinvestors.com or to reach out directly to learn more. Appreciate it and thank you everyone.